Good day, everyone. We are now on our lesson 4 of the estimation of parameter. And lesson 4 is about the population proportion. Okay, so what is it? What is the population proportion? Okay, so we have learned that the z distribution is used when n is greater than 30 or if we have a large sample size. And the population standard deviation or population variance is given. The t distribution is used when n is less than 30 and the only standard deviation given is from a sample. Okay? In this lesson, you will learn how to estimate the proportion of a population, sample size, and to limit the margin of error and get a higher accuracy for better result. Percentage, decimals, or fraction. Okay? Point estimate is a single value. So, nasabi ko na rin iyon sa mga previous lesson na yung point estimate, it only has a single value. Okay? Used to approximate a population parameter. The sample proportion denoted by this symbol, yung p hat, okay, is the best point estimate of the population proportion. Okay? There are research experiments which need an estimation of the proportion of the parameter or a confidence interval for the proportion or the population proportion. Below are some examples. Okay? Proportion of customers who are satisfied with the services rendered by a restaurant, or a proportion of Phil-Am players in the Philippines by a rugby team, proportion of registered voters who will likely vote in favor of a female candidate, okay? Proportion of college scholars who get a job related to their field of discipline, okay? So, in this lesson, we denote P as the population proportion and Q as of not P. So, hindi siya P, which is Q, okay? Kung hindi siya P, siya ay Q, okay? So, ibig sabihin, siya ay opposite ng P. Yung Q ay opposite ng P. Okay? So, P hat as the estimate samples proportion and Q hat as the estimated proportion of not P. Okay? The formula of P hat and Q hat are as follows. So, ito yung P. P is equals to X over N. Okay? Whereby X is the number of successes in N trials. Okay? So, ito yung success numbers. Ito yung how many times. Okay? Na nagawa o nangyari o numbers. Okay? So, this is Q hat, which is the opposite of P hat. The formula to compute for the Q hat is 1 minus P. So, ibig sabihin kung ano yung natira ni P, that is Q. Okay? Kasi, di ba, minus yung 1 kay P. Okay? Or that is 1 minus X over N. Is also equals to N minus X over N. Okay? Remember the following in the sample distribution of P hat. P hat is the estimates of a sample proportion with X successes in N trials. P hat is the best point estimate. If NP and NQ are both greater than or equal to 5, then P will have a normal distribution. From the central limit theorem, okay, so mean of P hat is equals to P, and standard deviation of P hat is equals to square root of P multiplied by Q, or PQ over N is also equal to the square root of P hat times Q hat over N. In the normal approximation of a binomial distribution, mean is equals to NP and standard deviation is equals to the square root of N P and Q, or N multiplied by P multiplied by Q, or times P times Q. Okay? If a sample is not representative of the population, then P hat will not be a useful estimate of P. Instead, use the sampling technique discussed in the previous lesson. Example, if 30 students from a batch of graduates were surveyed and 30 of them answered that they finished BS Industrial Engineering, what is the estimated proportion of who took BSIE out of the whole batch? Okay, so this is 350. Okay, from the given. Okay, so we have here 350. Okay, so 350 students, okay, 30 of them that they have finished BSIE. So let us have the estimate of who took BSIE from the whole batch. Okay, let P is the sample proportion of BSIE graduates. X is equals to 30, number of BSIE graduates, and N is equals to 30, 350, the number of the surveyed graduates. Okay. P is equals to X over N, so 30 over 350, we have here 0.086 or 8.6%. Okay. So ito yung ating P hat, which is 8.6%. Okay. Or yung ating point estimate. Okay, sample number 2. From the example given below, what is the estimated proportion of graduates who didn't take up BSIE? So, ang hanapin naman natin, kung ito ay P hat, hanapin natin ay Q hat. So, all we have to do is to get the formula. P hat is equals to 1 minus P. So, 1 minus 0.86 equals to 0.914 or 91.4%. Okay, ito yung ating Q hat. The following are formulas involving the concept of point estimation. Or to get the confidence interval of the population proportion, we have this formula. So, tandaan nyo, ito yung formula ng confidence interval of the population proportion. So, we have here the P hat minus Z sub A over 2 multiplied by the square root of P hat times Q hat over N and is equal to the point estimate of the P hat. Point estimate is less than the P hat, okay, plus the Z sub A over 2 multiplied by P hat times Q hat over N. Okay, so ito din yung P hat plus Z sub A over 2 over 2 multiplied by P hat square root of P hat times Q hat over N. Oh, pareho lang yan. Okay, the confidence interval of the difference of two proportion is given by. Okay, so haba ng formula, no? Pero pareho lang naman yan kapag dalawa yung given proportion. Okay, we have P hat sub 2, okay, and P hat sub 1, P hat sub 2. Okay, the standard error or SE, yung ating standard error of the estimate is SE, which is, so ito yung formula ng standard error or what we call the, kung doon sa population mean, ito yung tinatawag natin na margin of error. Okay, or yung tinatawag, dito ay, ito pala yung margin of error. So ito yung formula for the standard deviation of the proportion. So, kung titingnan natin dito sa formula, yan. So, wala siyang, ito yung kinuha natin for the standard deviation instead of, kasi wala naman tayong given na standard deviation. So, ito yung kinuha natin in replacement for the standard deviation. So, ito yung formula. Kaya, ang tawag natin dito ay standard of error. Yan. So, kung standard error, meron din tayo tinatawag na margin of error. So, ito yung score o yung z-score that should be the score for the yung z value for the margin of error. Okay? So, para makuha natin yan, ito yung formula ng margin of error. Ito yun. Itong part na yan. Plus the standard error. So, kasama yan sa formula ng margin of error. So, that would be z sub a over 2. Okay? Multiply by p hat times q hat over n. So, siya. So, ito yung z-score plus yung standard error, yung replacement ng standard deviation. Okay? So, conversion of p hat value to z value. Okay? So, recall that mean is equals to np and standard deviation is equals to the square root of np and q. Okay, so multiply natin tatlo. Since z is equals to x minus mean over the standard deviation from the central limit theorem. So, i-replace natin yung standard deviation, which is the square root of NP and Q, okay? And yung ating mean, i-replace natin ng NP. Okay, so ang formula for the Z would be, as for the central limit theorem, okay, would be Z, kasi ito yung formula ng central limit theorem. Substitute natin kung ano yung mga formula in the population proportion. Okay, yung mean would be N times P. So, kinuha natin yung N times P over yung standard deviation niya is the square root of NPQ. So, square root of NPQ thus, so ito na yan. Okay. So, ito yun. Nag-ano tayo ng mga formula para sa population proportion. Okay. Ito rin yung formula ng central limit theorem. Okay. Formula for estimating the sample size n of a population proportion, that would be n is equals to p hat times q hat over me, or the margin of error, okay, square root. Okay, i-square natin siya or multiply by itself. Okay, and then multiply by z sub a over 2 raised to 2 again, or we have here the exponent of 2, or multiply by itself. Okay. So, if p hat or q hat is unknown, you may use a consecutive estimate of p hat is equals to 0.5 and q hat is equal to 0.5. Then, p hat and q hat is equals to 0.25. Thus, we have n is equals to 0.25 over me square multiplied by z sub a over 2 square. For formula for the sample size n sub I in estimating the difference in two proportions. So, ito yon, kapag 2 yung proportion, that this will be the formula that we will use. Okay? A random sample size 75 is selected from a binomial probability with p is equals to 0.13, and it is approximate to use normal distribution of approximate the sampling distribution of the sample mean. Okay? So, population p is equals to 13. So, q is equals to 1 minus p. So, yung q natin ay 0.87. Okay? And p is equals to 0.13 times 75. That would be 9.75. And NQ is 0.75 times 0.87. That would be 65.25. Both are greater than 5. Since both NP and NQ are greater than 5, we can use the normal distribution to approximate the sampling distribution of the sample mean. Example number 4. 200 randomly selected graduates are asked or were asked whether they believe that the country's employment status will improve under the new president. 100 of them said yes. Construct a 90% confidence interval for the proper proportion of the graduates who believe the employment status will improve. Okay, solution. Given we have x is 120 and n is 200, p is equals to x over n, that is 120 over 200, that would be 0.6. Thus, q hat is equals to 1 minus p hat is equals to 0.4. Using the formula required to get the confidence interval, we have p hat is equals to z sub a over 2 multiplied by the square root of p hat over n is less than p, and is less than the p hat, plus z sub a over 2 multiplied by the square root of p hat over n. Okay. Recall for the confidence level of 90%, a is equals to 10%, and z sub a is equals to 6.645. Okay, so this would be our z-score. Substituting the given values, we get, so p hat is 0.6. Okay, so nakuha naman natin yan dito. We have the z-score, which is z sub a over 2, which is 1.645. So, given naman to kanina. Okay, so we have p hat and q hat, 0.6 and 0.4. So, 0.6 and 0.4. And we have n, which is 200. Okay, n is less than p, n is less than 0.6 plus 1.645, okay, which is the z-score. And the square root of 0.6 multiplied by 0.4 over 200. Okay, So, kung kukumputin nyo yan, yung magiging result ng confidence interval is from 0.543 to 0.657 or 54.3% to 65.7%. Again, ito ay range of values. Okay? So, na-determine natin siya by these two values, which is 54.3 and 65.7. Pero ang value niya ay hindi 54.3 at 65.7 lang. Okay? Ito ay from, okay, 54.3 hanggang 65.7. Okay? Dahil ito ay range of values. Okay? 54.3% to 65.7%. Okay, so interpretation natin, we are 90% confident that about 54.2% to 65.8% of the workers believe that the country's economy will improve under the new president. Okay? Okay, so answer what I can do. And that's it. Have a nice day.